This is Gemara Zevachim Daf Nun, and we're holding on Mem Tesem Beis. We are 5 lines from the wide lines. You see a parentheses. The Gemara has a simin, Hekesh, Gzir, Shavek, Kal, V'chaymer, simin. And we're about to take a deep dive into the world of the Yud Gimel Midoi Shater Nidreshes Vahem, and more particularly, whether one limud, whether one type of drasha is allowed to build upon the next. And all the learning should be an incredible schos refuah shleima for Gavriel Simcha ben Miriam Ahuva. So we're going to start the journey. It's going to take us about 2 days, 2 blot, in which the Gemara is going to be discussing all different types of the Yud Gimel Midais. There are 4 in particular, which is Hekish, when you put 2 things next to each other. Gzeir Shava, when the same word is utilized in both places. Kal v'chaymer, misvara, one is more kal, you can learn out that which is more chamer. And binyanav, that the 2 have a joining factor. And the question basically is, can and is it allowed in the rules of Yid Gimel Midas, in the rules of Halach L'Moshe Sinai, is it allowed to have one on top of another? Are you allowed to have a hekish on top of a hekish on Gzeir Shava, v'chulu, v'chulu? And if we have 4 primary types of drashais, if you do all the permutations, we're going to have 16 different questions. So here we go. Says the Gemara, 4 lines from the wide lines. Davar halamed v'hekish in chayzer malamin v'hekish. Says the Gemara, this is really the opening statement, which is the concluding statement of the previous sugya, which the Gemara taught us that which we learn from a hekish cannot teach through a hekish. Imid Rava, Imid Ravina. Whether we learn it from Rava or Ravina. So says Gemara, okay, so that is a hekish upon a hekish. But ask the Gemara, Davar alamed behekish, ma'u sheyilmad b'gzeira shava. Something that is learned through a hekish. Again, the Torah has 2 things written side by side, teaching us a din. Can you now go and take that din and utilize a gzeira shava of the word being similar to another word and teach us another din? Are we allowed to piggyback one din on the next? Tashema, says the Gemara, how do we know that if there's a pricha on begadim, dinim of saras, if there's an eruption, literally pricha is, that the saras just spreads everywhere over a garment? How do we know a unique chiddush, even though we know saras is mitame? But says the Gemara, but if it's a pricha of saras, if it's a sudden outburst, if it's all over, then the halacha is shehi tahira, that the beged is tar. As Rashi in the second wide line says, is parchas saras b'chol ha-beged. So how do we know? Says the Gemara. Nemar karchas v'gabachas v'begadim. Says the Gemara, by begadim says karchas and gabachas. And never karchas gabachas be'adam mal halam parach be'kulay tar. What's the din? If the tzaras is parach bekulay adam, the halacha is he's tarach kabarach bekulay, he should be tahir. So says the Gemara, we should be able to learn it out from adam. So that step in itself is very simple. But now we have to show that the original din was learned from a hekish. In the case of the human, again, so we're learning out the beged from the adam. That's fine. But how do you know the adam? So we're about to prove we learned the adam from the hekish. And that will be our makar. You got a hekish, and then you got a gzeira shava. Says the Gemara, by adam v'hasa minalan, tichsev, on the 3rd wide line, me'roshvad ragla, from his head until his feet, v'iskish, and we make a hekish rosh ragel malahalon, just like by the body. Kulay hafach lavan parach v'kulay tar. If the tzaras turns completely white and it's over the entire body, is tar. Avkan, so to hear when we have tzaras on the guy's roisha his head, you're going to be tahor. So the hekish teaches us the din about the adam being tahor, and then the second step is we have a gzera shava, taking that din and applying it to a beged. So we see that you could, yes, piggyback a gzera shava on top of a hekish. Amar Rabbi Yochanan no raya. B'chol ha'Torah kula lemeidim lamad milamad. In the entirety of Torah, we could learn one from the next. Chutz min ha'kodshim she'ein damin lamad milamad. We cannot learn one from the next, and therefore tzaras is not didn't kodshim. It's not a raya. Meaning, we're talking specifically about kodshim. Stam b'Torah. That's not a big deal. We're yes allowed to have a double hekish. We're yes allowed to have a gzera shava on a hekish. Our discussion centering in kodshim. In the world of kodshim, can you do that? Says the Gemara. Therefore, it's no raya from tzaras to imkain. Because if so, lo yoymar sfaina ba'asham. What's the problem? It should not have said sfaina ba'asham. Why not? Why don't we just learn it out from a chatos? Lav lememrad, is it not teaching us? So we see clearly that by kachim we do not say this double. We do not allow gzera shava to build on a hekish. Says Gemara, wait, maybe it's because you can ask malachatos shchem mechaperes. Al chayve krisos. Maybe pshat is because you can ask that it comes to achatas gives kapara for chayve krisos, and maybe that's the reason why. That's the reason why the chatas is done by asham and in the safain, and the asham were not. Says the Gemara, lechat malachashkin lechaberes chayve krisos. Kache miseri ksiv. Says the Gemara, there's an extra. Kachim, the Torah has extra words, and therefore, that's what's going to allow us to make this gzera shava. Continues the Gemara. That's the reason why we're going to be able to bring a raya, even by kachim, to having gzera shava on top of hekish. On the last line, a third. So again, we had hekish on hekish, then we had gzera shava on hekish. Now says the Gemara, something that you learn from a hektish, can you then go and utilize the kal v'chaimer to take it to the next step? We turn over to Nunam and Aleph, says the Gemara, we can learn out that a yes gzera shava could be piggybacked on a hekish from Tanat Dever Yishmael, as we learned in Daf Aleph. Rashi says, we said over there, we already started this conversation 9 blot ago, that Rabbi Yishmael said, so we have a clear ayah. Says the Gemara, however, that we're not sure. And if you're just keeping track in the math, if we have 4 mutations that you have to figure all 4 out, so the first way to do it is everything starting with hekish. We're going hekish, zera shava, hekish kal v'chaimer, hekish binyanav, and then we're going to change the permutation. So says the Gemara, so what about a binyanav? So Amar Rav Yirmiyah, lo yilech lav safayna ba'asham deisi binyanav. So Torah should not have written safain by the asham, and we would have been able to learn out the requirement of safain by the asham from the binyanav mechatas. Says the Gemara, but if that was true, then what reason to write safain by asham lav lememra? Is it not to teach us our din that we're looking for davar magishin chayzer umelamed b'binyanav? So says the Gemara, this is going to be our mikar that davar alayim behekish, you're not going to be able to take it to the next step. Davar alayim behekish, you'll not be able to go and continue with a binyan av. Continues the Gemara, but wait, 6 lines down. No, based on what you're telling me, why are we saying this binyan av? Says the Gemara, why don't we learn out from an oyla? Why is that better? Because by Oyla it says Safain explicitly. We're learning a binyan from Chatos, and then you need a Hekish. Says Gemara, wait, go straight to the source. A binyan from Oyla. My time alayasi. Why are we not saying that? Because you can ask Kasha Malaj King Kolo. Says the Gemara, you're right. You're not going to be able to learn out one from one, but maybe we could learn out one from two. Says the Gemara, where are we learning out from? But those have a special din. Chatas v'asham gives the kapara. But Malal Shekain is a charim. For the other two, so says the Gemara, we're not going to be able to learn out one from the other, and that's the reason why. That's the reason why the Torah is going to have to learn out Safain by each and every one of the karbanis. Says the Gemara, wait, Davar lam Gzeir Shava mahu. Something that is learned from Gzeir Shava, mahu sheyilmad behekish. What is the story? Could he go to Hekish? So we go to the next level. Could Gzeir Shava go and teach us further via a Hekish? Amra Papa. Says the Gemara, Im ala taida, lamanu la taida. You know this teaches us that a taida sheba min meiser. Taida can come from meiser sheni. Midash chan shlamim dasu mi meiser shlamim gufayu minel. Why did the Torah have to write it by a shlamim? Tachsev sham sham. Amalei marzu shabred Rav Mari. I'll tell you why the Ravina. Meiser dagan chulin ba'al mahu. Meiser dagan is there is no kedusha, and therefore it's chulin, and it's not in our discussion of kachim. So says the Gemara, I don't understand. What's our whole conversation? As we said in the beginning of Amid Base, conversation is davka by kachim. To bring a raya, there are double akishim and things like that. That's not a kasha. We're asking specifically by kachim. So Amra Ravina says back to Marzutra, Amar Amra, did the one who said this din also say that what? Lamad Kodash, Kodash, Malami Kodash. But the case that we learn out and the case that you're teaching are Kachim? No, he never said that. And therefore, who cares that Rav Papa is beginning with Meiser Sheni? The Lamaisa is we're also learning out what? Ashlamim, a taida, and those are kachim, and therefore it shows us that you could have Gzeir Shava following a hekish. Says the Gemara, okay, let's go to the next combination. Davar Allah made Gzeir Shava, Ma'oshi Allah made Gzeir Shava. Back to Gzeir Shava, Zamir Chamatanya. Soiles Merveches. Says the Torah, it should be a soiles, which is flour, merbeches, of scalded and boiling hot. Lamanu, this teaches us the Ravucha, sheba soiles. This teaches us that the flour which is scalded is Ravucha, comes together with the flour of the Torah. Chalois minayin. From where do we know that the chalois also have to be made from such soiles, fine flour? Tamaleimer chalois chalois. Rekikin minayin. Where do we know that the taidas you rekikin as we wafers no chametz? Tamalaymar mitzvahs mitzvahs. So says the Gemara, we have our makar. Dilma, but wait. Amrli Ravina. What's that? That's going to be our raya. That's going to be our raya. That a two-step process is going to be able to be learned through a Gzeira Shava. Says the Gemara. But the din of Rav Yechon would not apply in Gzeir Shava, following Gzeir Shava, as we see in the Brisa. Amli Ravina mimahi de mitzvahs mechalois gamar. Says Ravina, how do you know about this Gzeir Shava? Dilma mimafa taner gamber. Maybe the same word we find by an oven baked mafa tanor mincha. So how do you know which one to learn it out from? Elamai Rava comes like Rava. 8 lines on the bottom. The first one line is Amar. Says Rava Tanya. Bikirba uparshu par upirshe vaitziu. And the inners and the waist you remove milamid. Shemaitzia shalem. It teaches us that you have to remove it while it's still shalem, while it's still whole, before it was cut up and dismembered. Maybe you should burn it shalem. Nemar kan roishay krov. Nemar alan roishay krov. Through dissecting and cutting up the animal. But ask the Gemara, you also have to do a hefshit. Says the Gemara, no, because it says Vikir Parashav. Says the Gemara, my Talmud though. Where do you learn it out from? What do you see from over here? How do you see from over here that there's no din of hefshit? Just like the waist has to stay within the kirbai, the inner, so too everything else. So you see, it has to be full. There's no skinning. Tanya, we learned in a right Vitanya, and we learned in a Bryce in the last line. Rabbi Omer Nemerkan Ar Basar Peresh. Peresh. It says over here the ar, the hide, the basar, the flesh, who perish in the waist. It says over here by the karbanos of Yom Kippur. As we turn over to Nunamid Bey, says the Gemara of Nemerlahalan Ar Basar Peresh. Says the same thing by the power of the Kohen Gadol Malahalan. Aideni Tuach Shlei Behevshet Avkan. Aideni Tuach Shlei Behevshet, and that's our makar that there's no hefshet, but rather there's just going to be the classical nituach. You don't have to cut apart the animal, and that is where the Brisa says what parts could be used. Next example again. So again, we start with Hekish and it's 3. Now we're in Gzeir Shava and it's 3 or 4. Kavachimer says the Gemara. Well, my hekish ain't melamed behekish, and hekish cannot double behekish. Even Ravina, and yet melamed kavachimer tanvei Ishmael. Gzeir Shava. When it comes to Gzeir Shava, melamed is behekish. Midra Papa. So ain't I din shetel ma kavachimer. Should yes be able to teach to a kavachimer. Ha nicha says for 1 second. If you olamand is the Rabbab, then fine. Elamand the less the Rabbaba. And everyone agreed with Rabbaba, but according to Marzutra, who argued on Rabbaba, Ma'ika Limeimar, says the Gemara, Ella Kal V'chaimer, Umay Hekish in Melamed Behekish. Now, when it comes to a Hekish, you cannot teach to another Hekish, even Ravina, Melamed, the Kal V'chaimer, yeah, you could yes teach with Kal V'chaimer, but it doesn't very small. So Gzeir Shava, Hamilamedes Gzeir Shava, you could yes learn Chaverta. So you should yes be able to go on to the next step. Midrim Barchama Einoidin Shetalamid B'Kavachaimer. She yes you have to learn out from a Kavachaimer. Next case, Gzeir Shava Shamed Bibinyan. So we're finishing up Gzeir Shava. I asked the Gemara, so they learn from Gzeir Shava. Can you then follow it through the Binyan? And on this one, the Gemara dives right into a teku. Next, so we took care of all the 4 permutations of Hekish, all the 4 permutations of Gzeir Shava. And now says the Gemara, let's go into the next level, which is Kal V'chaimer. Ma'u sheyilmad beHekish. Can a Kal V'chaimer, says the Gemara, be taught through a Hekish? Kal V'chaimer, says the Gemara, Kal V'chaimer. And yet, it's yes, Melamed Behekish with Rav Papa, Kavachimer, Alamed Behekish with Tanvei Ishmael. Hey, no, I didn't. It should, of course, be able to learn out with the Hekish. Says the Gemara, Hanich, Lamandis Leder Rav Papa, Lamandis Leder Rav Papa, Michael, and Meimar. Once again, Teku, we're going to have to wait for Eliyahu Navi to answer up these drushes. Davar Alevi Kavachimer, Ma'ashem B'Gzeir Shava, next level. Kavachimer. Ma Gzeir Shava shein melamed behekish midrav Yechan. Yeah, melamed Gzeir Shava midrav Barchama. Kavachimer alamed behekish with Tanvei Yishmael Einodin. Shetel mad should yes to learn out through a Gzeir Shava. Next, Within the world of Kavachaimer. Kavachaimer. Omag Zir Shav Shinalam the baggage with Rabbi Yechon Yamalam Kavachaimer the Amaran. Kavachaimer Alam baggage of Tanur Ishmael. Eino Disham Kavachaimer. So we see Kavachaimer is going to be very strong. It's going to keep on being able to regenerate. If Zel Kavachaimer, Ben Kavachaimer, two-step Kavachaimer, Ben Benoishal Kavachaimer. Ela Kavachaimer. Excuse me, ask the Gemara Ben Benoishal Kavachaimer. It's not a Benoi. It's a Ben Benoi. It's the next level. Says the Gemara, Ella, I'll tell you. Kavachaimer, Uma Hekish, Eino Lamed Bekish, Imid Rav Ravina. Yam Lamed Kavachaimer, then very Ishmael. Kavachaimer, Lamed Bekish, then very Ishmael. Eino Din Shem Kavachaimer, Zao Kavachaimer, Ben Kavachaimer, and that's the next fermentation that you could, yes, have a Kavachaimer, Ben Kavachaimer. Pick it up from here as we'll continue going through remaining cases, B'siyata Vishmayim.